Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
It's customary for us to go around the room and say our names for everyone to see we're present. Is there anyone here for the first time? Could you tell us who you are?
I'm John.
Hi, John. Welcome. I'm Len.
Good day, Ellen.
My name's Gary.
My name is Harley.
I'm Alter Nathan.
Gary.
My name is Mark.
I'm Jerry.
John.
Jim.
Philip.
I'm Brad.
Michael.
My name is Cass.
I'm Jack.
I'm David.
I'm John.
Risha.
Michael. I'm Oswaldo.
I'm Roy.
Jay.
Richard. My name is Joe.
Ricardo.
Dennis.
And our speaker today is known to most of you, but I will introduce him for a new person. David Lewis will be speaking on the 4 foundations of mindfulness, part 1. David has been following the Dharma path for 40 years. He attended his first retreat in the Shambhala tradition at the age of 17 and has been practicing insight meditation since moving to San Francisco over 25 years ago. David teaches an insight meditation course at the Mission Dharma Sangha and facilitates a weekly meditation group for seniors. In 2013, he led the Gay Buddhist Fellowship's Fall Retreat. A graduate of Spirit Rock Meditation Center's dedicated practitioners program, David also has a degree in comparative religious studies. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Len. Good morning. I'm not going to make you put your hands up, but I want to do a little silent poll in our heads. I just want to put out the questions. What part of the program at GBF do you like best? The sitting meditation part in silence or the Dharma talk? Just kind of think if you have a preference. Most people do. There's not a right answer to that one. And there's actually 3 things we do. We have a Dharma talk, we have a sitting meditation, and we have sharing in Sangha. And they kind of reflect the 3 gems in Buddhism, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. But our preferences are interesting because the meditation part of the program and the Dharma talk part of the program are basically 2 different ways of gaining wisdom. And the Buddha talked about this because the Buddha lived in a time of a very rich intellectual activity in India. India had many great cultures at the time of the Buddha that flourished even more in the years after the Buddha lived. It was close to the high point of Indian culture. And actually, the Buddha was contemporaneous with the pre-Socratic philosophers in Greece, which was not the high point, but working up to the high point of Greek culture, same time. But anyway, so the Buddha lived in this time of great intellectual ferment, and there were universities, and there were great philosophers, and there were different schools of theology, and different religions, Hinduism, Sikhism. So a lot of smart people around, and a lot of traveling teachers, like the Buddha was, that were just kind of on the road, giving lectures as they went from town to town. But the Buddha was not a philosopher, nor was he a theologian. He wasn't founding a religion, and he didn't advocate philosophy in the way that the Greeks did, in the way we think about it, solving our problems through thinking, or approaching human problems through systematic human thought. And this is what was really radical and different about the Buddha and the practice that he founded. Is he was, in terms of philosophy, the way we think about philosophy, the Buddha was a phenomenologist. The Buddha believed that wisdom, true wisdom, the most important kinds of wisdom that could really change our lives, that are transformational, that lead to enlightenment, come from direct experience of reality through our senses. Direct experience of reality, not thinking about reality, not interpreting, the Buddha didn't talk so much about why things are. The Buddha talked about how things worked. So in that sense, the Buddha was a scientist. And I think in terms of mental science, that, in my humble opinion, he's the greatest scientist of mental science that's ever lived on Earth. I think Buddha, through systematic study, really came to understand the mind in a profound way that has been reinforced and proven over and over again for the past 2,600 years. There's been a lot of experimentation with his method, and it tends to work. So, what the Buddha advocated that was particularly unique in his world was the practice of mindfulness. It's not the only thing he advocated. When the Buddha's most famous teaching was the Four Noble Truths, which you've all heard various versions of here at GBF over time. I have a teacher that says there's really only one Dharma talk, and it's the Four Noble Truths. No matter what anybody is talking about, it's some aspect of the Four Noble Truths. And indeed, mindfulness is an aspect of the Four Noble Truths. The fourth of the Four Noble Truths is the Eightfold Path, which you've also heard about before. Eightfold Path being the path to awakening, taking care of, covering all different aspects of our lives, from sila, which is virtue, to meditation, to contemplation, to wisdom. But the seventh part of the Eightfold Path is mindfulness. So what I'm talking about in this short series, we're doing a four-part series over 4 months, is I'm going to be talking about mindfulness, the seventh factor on the Eightfold Path. And today, let me say that the Buddha's most famous teaching on mindfulness is a sutta. Sutta is a teaching or a talk, a sutta that he gave called the Satipatthana Sutta. Satipatthana being the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And what Satipatthana is, what the sutta is all about, is it's basically, it's a brilliant thing. It's this incredible menu of objects of mindfulness. Or, to put it another way, his recommendation for what you should do with your mind when you meditate. And not only just when you meditate, because meditation and mindfulness are not exactly the same thing. When we meditate, most of us, in most traditions, and when we meditate, we try to be mindful. And we try to have an object of meditation because that helps us focus in, gives us something to be mindful of, and I'll get back to that. But when we meditate, we try to be mindful. But we can also be mindful when we're not meditating. We can be mindful in daily life. We can be mindful actually all the time, 24 hours a day. But that takes some practice, and it's not so easy. And that's what that Buddha advocated. The Buddha advocated that we be mindful at all times. The reason we meditate is because meditation is the easiest way to sit down and practice mindfulness. Meditation is like the exercise of mindfulness, where we sit down and we say, okay, I'm going to do nothing but be mindful for the next 30 minutes. Not so easy to do. Some of you have probably discovered. When we sit here and meditate for 30 minutes in the morning at GPF, everybody is quiet and most people have their eyes closed, and you probably have this fantasy that everybody is deep and tranquil peace except you. Well, pretty much everybody's probably thinking the same thing. It's like, okay, my mind is just going all over the place, or my body aches, or I'm having an emotional breakdown. But my eyes are closed and nobody knows. So meditation and mindfulness are not exactly the same thing, but meditation is how we practice mindfulness. It's our direct experience of reality. We're really trying to get in touch with reality. And the Buddha taught our experience of reality is fairly limited to our 5 senses. The information that comes to us through hearing, seeing, touching, tasting, through our bodies, basically. So to get back to the Satipatthana Sutta, which I'm going to be talking about in 4 parts, because there's 4 foundations of mindfulness. The first foundation of mindfulness is the body. The first thing the Buddha said you should focus your attention on, to experience reality, to be in the moment, to know yourself, to find happiness, to find peace and tranquility, is your body. The second foundation of mindfulness is feelings. We'll talk about that next time. The third foundation is thoughts. We'll talk about how to work with thoughts in meditation and in daily life. And the fourth foundation is everything else, basic categories of experience. But today I'm going to be talking about the body a little bit. Oh, I got a quote from the Buddha before I get into the body. I'll share with you. To show how important the Buddha thought mindfulness was. At the very beginning of the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha says, he's speaking to his monks, he's speaking to his community, he says, monks, this is the direct path for the purification of beings, for the surmounting of sorrow and lamentation, for the disappearance of dukkha and discontent, for acquiring the true method, for the realization of Nibbana, namely the 4 Satipatthanas. So this teaching of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the Buddha is saying here in his introduction that it's all you need to know. It's the path to liberation. So it's pretty important. So the first foundation of mindfulness is the body. And you might ask, what's the purpose of contemplating the body? Why is the Buddha making that his most fundamental recommendation, the body? The first reason is that the body anchors us in the here and now. If you truly want to be in the present moment, we all say, right, that we'd like to be in the present moment, and we try to be in the present moment, and it's a good idea to be in the here and now, but we spend very little time here. If you truly want to be in the here and now, get in touch with your body. And I mean by that the direct experience. Don't think about your body. Notice the feeling of the bottoms of your feet. Notice the weight of your body on the seat of your chair. Notice your breath. The in-breath, the out-breath. Mindfulness is precognitive. Mindfulness is something you do before you think about it. So if you can notice your breath without thinking, oh, that's a nice breath or not a nice breath, or that's a short breath or a long breath, without labeling it, without having ideas about your breath, if you can simply notice your breath or the weight of your body in your chair, you're being mindful. Precognitive. As soon as you start having thoughts about your sensations, you're out of mindfulness. You're doing something else. You're thinking. So mindfulness is about direct experiences. It's very important. And it's really hard for us to stay in our direct experience because of our training and our conditioning, and especially with us Westerners, the way we've been taught to learn things. We automatically go into thinking about things. We think the way we learn, the way we know, the way we come to understand something is by thinking about things. So getting back to my original question for you, which do you prefer, the meditation part or the Dharma talk part? A lot of you, because most Westerners tend to prefer the Dharma part talk, the Dharma talk part, because that's the way we're conditioned to learn. It's a little entertaining. It comes to us cognitively as something to think about. Somebody is telling us something. We know how to listen, make our own judgment about it. Maybe we agree, maybe we don't agree. We know how to deal with that. But the meditation part, if you're being mindful, if you're being with your direct experience, the meditation part is where the Buddha said you gain true wisdom. And that tends to be a hard thing for Westerners to trust. So I hope we have a chance to talk about this a little bit, about your questions about mindfulness and meditation. Because if nothing else, I'd like to really encourage you to be more mindful, and that means maybe meditate a little bit more than you do normally. So the body, contemplation of the body allows us to be in the here and now, first and foremost. It's a tool to be in the present. The second purpose of contemplation of the body is detachment and sense restraint. And that's all about detaching from our obsession with our body and our obsession with other people's bodies. As gay men, we know a lot about that. We get attached to our body. Our attachment to body is what makes us fear of death. It makes us fear death. Because we're afraid of losing this thing we're so attached to. And our attachment to other bodies, well, we all know, what addiction, what kind of an addiction that can be. So there's nothing wrong with honoring our body and taking care of our bodies. It's a very important thing. Nothing wrong with admiring other people's bodies. But there's more to us than bodies. The third purpose of contemplation of the body is calm and insight. And you might notice that in the meditation part of our program, or when you meditate at home, that when you close your eyes, if you focus on your breath, I don't know what your particular meditation practice is, but if you focus on the breath, or if you focus on your posture or some part of your body, the mind calms down. A still body lends itself to a still mind. And vice versa, a still mind lends itself to a still body. So there are many advantages to contemplation of the body. So the Buddha, the Satipatthana Sutta is a bunch of lists of things that are appropriate objects of contemplation and meditation. And it's important, at least in the way the Buddha teaches meditation and mindfulness in this sutta, his general teachings, it's important in meditation or to have an object of meditation. So in the body part of the sutta, the body is the object of meditation. I don't know how many of you, it's something to think about, whether you have an actual object of meditation when you meditate. Is there one thing you focus on, like your breath? Or do you, and there's not a right answer to this, do you open up your consciousness, your awareness to whatever's happening? So it might be a bodily sensation in one moment, and it might be your breath in the next moment, and it might be an itch on your head the next moment, and then it might be a thought, a worry. And then all of a sudden you get caught up in your thought, and you get attached to it, and you're off in woo-woo land, and you're no longer particularly mindful, you're thinking. Then you notice that that's happening. Oh, I got carried, I'm thinking, I'm drifting off. And you come back to your breath. That's why it's useful for a lot of us to have instructions, some reminders, instructions from a teacher or someone in the sangha when we're sitting, because it reminds us to come back to our object of meditation. Sometimes we need to be reminded. So in the contemplation of the body, in the first foundation of mindfulness, the Buddha had one of these lists of what parts of the body, what aspects of the body can you contemplate, can use for an object of meditation. Any one of these or any group of these you can experiment with. That's the fun thing about the Satipatthana Sutta, is it gives you all these different objects of meditation. Try this, try that. So the first one, and the most fundamental one, is breathing. And I'm sure you've all heard instructions. If you go to other sanghas, or if you belong to other groups, people pretty much know that breathing, the mindfulness of breath, is probably the single most common object of meditation that the Buddha recommended. It's called anapanasati, mindfulness of breath. The Buddha had another sutta, which is nothing about that, about nothing other than that. It's the teaching of paying attention to your breath when you're meditating. And that was actually, breath was the object of meditation that the Buddha was using when he gained enlightenment himself. So you could say that if you just spent the rest of your life meditating on nothing but your breath, that would be an adequate path to enlightenment for you. That could be it. But the nice thing about Satipatthana, the nice thing about these teachings, is that the Buddha gives you a whole menu. The breath might get boring. You might get tired of that. And it's nice, if you're a regular meditator, it's really nice to be able to try something different every once in a while. Makes life interesting. Another body contemplation the Buddha recommended on this list is the 4 postures. So basically there's 4 body postures that are all amenable to meditation or to mindfulness. Sitting, what all of us are doing right now. Standing, walking. Then if you've been on a retreat, you've done walking meditation. And lying down. Basically 4 postures. You can meditate in any one of them. They're all good. They're all useful. Lying down we don't recommend so much, because we tend to go, when we lie down and close our eyes, we tend to go to sleep. Our body just is conditioned to get that message. But if any of you are experienced meditators and find that mindfulness is kind of automatically coming in your life, you might notice that when you're lying down, it's kind of a lovely time to be mindful. My favorite time to meditate now is the very moment that I wake up in the morning. I used to get up, and the first thing I did when I got up was I would get on a cushion and do sitting meditation. And now I'm mindful of what's going on in my mind the moment that I wake up, because it kind of is a dream that's starting to turn into consciousness, and my thoughts tend to be almost as wacky as they are when they're dreaming, and it's just interesting. And what happens is I can kind of prevent my mind from gearing up and getting into that kind of daily anxiety mode that happens a little bit too fast in the morning. Bodily activities is another category. Things you do with your body. are appropriate for mindfulness. So if you do yoga, it's a really obvious mindful activity. And obviously people were doing yoga in the Buddha's time. And there's, I don't know if any of you saw the yoga exhibit at the Asian Art Museum that was here a couple of months ago. One of the things that they pointed out in that is that yoga was originally thought to be a warm-up for meditation. That was the purpose of yoga, was to get you ready to meditate. And if any of you do yoga, and especially if any of you have done yoga and then sat down in meditation, you'll know that kind of magical things happen. It's really, having done some yoga puts your mind in a really wonderful, calm, peaceful place where you just drop into meditation. But not just, yoga isn't our only bodily activity. If you go to the gym, that can be a mindful activity, what you're doing at the gym. Walking, obviously. But I get on the elliptical trainer, and I don't hook myself into music, and I don't read books. I just, pay attention to the activity of my body. So when we're doing yoga, when we're on the elliptical, when we're lifting weights, when we're walking the dog, to do that mindfully is to pay very careful attention to exactly the mechanics of what's going into that activity. Left leg forward, right leg forward, left leg, right leg, without turning it into a cognitive activity. In other words, if you can do yoga without thinking, or without getting caught up in your thoughts, you're being mindful. Another bodily contemplation in this sutta that the Buddha taught was anatomical parts. And I'm not going to go into that, but he's basically said you can sit for hours in meditation, going from your toenails to your scapula, to your fibula, to your pus, to your hairs, to and use anatomical parts as an object of meditation. Another one on the list is the four elements: earth, air, fire, water. We don't do this so much in our culture, but it's almost universal. It was for the Greeks, was for the Indians, was for the Chinese. That they believe the body, human body, and actually most all of material creation is made up of earth, air, fire, water, and some combination of those. That can be a contemplation. And I know people that have done month-long meditation retreats where that's been their only object of meditation is the four elements: earth, air, fire, water. How can everything be broken down into these four elements? And the last one, and most disturbing for most people, and you may know, is the corpse in decay. And the Buddha actually recommended that his monks, and some traditions and some teachers still do this, that his monks go sit in a charnel ground in India and look at a corpse and reflect on what happens to the body as it breaks down. So any of these can be a focus of your meditation, of your mindfulness. And this is just a small subset of the objects of meditation that the Buddha talks about in the Satipatthana Sutta. We're just talking about the body today. But it's a really important one. If you don't have any other object of meditation, use your body. And if you're not using an object of meditation at all, if when you meditate, you're just kind of sitting quietly and letting your mind wander from one thing to another and kind of daydreaming, which happens to all of us sometimes. That's not being mindful. And it's really helpful to have an object to come back to. In my tradition, there's three, when we give meditation instructions to beginners, we talk about having an object of meditation. We often refer to it as an anchor, like a ship's anchor. Because if you think of the image of a ship or a boat that's out in a bay, if it's not anchored, it'll wash away with the tides. It'll move around. It won't go someplace other than, it will not stay in the same spot. So using that metaphor, in meditation, we're trying to cultivate the mind. We're trying to train the mind. And one of the ways of doing that is getting it to stay in the same spot, getting it to stay in the present, in the here and now. So it's really useful to have an anchor, one or two objects of meditation that when you get lost, when you drift off, when you get sleepy, you can come back to when you notice it's happening. And generally, those objects are all body objects. The most common anchor for meditation is your breath. But you can also use your body. You can use your posture as a whole when you're meditating. Just focus your attention on, okay, my feet are on the floor like this. My butt is on the seat like this. I feel the back of the seat. I feel all the touch points. I feel my clothes touching my body. I feel my hands resting in each other. I feel my eyelids touching each other when they're closed. And another body-based object of meditation that's often recommended, anchor, is sound. You don't hear this one so often, but I find it's kind of a useful one, particularly if you're in a noisy place when you're meditating, or if you live on a noisy street. We often think that sound is disturbing and that we should be meditating in a perfectly quiet place, and any sound that happens is a disturbance. But it might not be. A sound, somebody sneezing in this room during meditation might be just what you need to come back to the present moment, because you have drifted off into La La Land, and you're wondering, thinking about what you're going to make for lunch later on. And a sneeze, or a sound, or a door slamming, you go, oh, bring you right back. You come back to the moment. So sound can be a really useful object for meditation. So if you don't use an anchor, if you don't use an object for meditation, I recommend that you choose one. And particularly that it be body-based. So if you take nothing else away from this talk, or the understanding of the first foundation of mindfulness, the body can be useful. I know I already said it, but I want to repeat that there's nothing more present, nothing more real, nothing more here and now about your experience than your body. This practice of mindfulness and Buddhism in general is a very body-based practice. Yes, somebody that's not a Buddhist or doesn't practice, they'll think, oh, it's all about your head. It's about, your mind. It's really very body-based. It's about the mind anchoring itself in the body. James Joyce has a line in one of his novels that Mr. Duffy lived a short distance from his body. And ain't that the truth? Most of us live a short distance from our body, meaning our mind is out here like a balloon on a tether, kind of someplace not quite resting in our body. Our mind is going off doing one thing, and our body is unaware of it. So we're really talking about bringing the mind and the body together. The Buddha called this the body, all material things. The word in the Pali language is rupa. So that's actually called a Buddha rupa. And this is a rupa. This is my rupa. That's the statue rupa. This is a flower rupa. And the mind, the word for mind, is nama, which is also name. It's the way we name things, the way we label things. So nama rupa, mind and body. This practice that we do, this meditation practice, is about bringing the mind and the body together. And so it's not just about the mind. Wes Nisker, who's a local teacher, local Buddhist teacher. You might know him. He was a famous disc jockey in the 80s and a bit of a clown, and wrote a book called
Crazy Wisdom. Crazy Wisdom.
Crazy Wisdom, thank you. Said of the body. The Buddha intuited some type of evolutionary process that creates our bodies, and his essential point is that they are neither formed nor owned by us. We have evidence that our bodies arise from the forces and elements that make up the entire universe through a complex chain of interdependent events. Internalizing this understanding can help liberate us from the powerful sense of ownership and attachment we have to our body. So our body, contemplation of our body, can be a tool, can be a connection to our understanding that we're connected to all things, that we're made up of the same stardust as whales and diamonds and the oceans of the earth. Our bodies aren't just us. So contemplation of the body is a path to liberating ourselves from the body. Not that the body is a bad thing. We don't have that idea in Buddhism that exists in the Judeo-Christian tradition, in some traditions, that the body is a detriment to our soul. The body is a good thing, but the body gets old and the body dies. The body gets sick. The body's impermanent. And it's our insecure trying to hold on to having a beautiful body, or even a healthy body, or a body that's going to last forever, a body that's not going to die, that is a source of so much suffering in our lives. So much suffering. And the Buddha's message and the Buddha's teaching was always about alleviating suffering. You could say that it's about being happy. But the Buddha's idea of happiness is not the same idea, is not the same thing as our kind of Western idea of happiness. The Western idea of happiness is getting something that gives us a good feeling, acquiring something, having something. The Buddha's idea of happiness is accepting things as they are, including old age, illness, and death. Death, as I think I said before, death is only fearful to the extent of which we are attached to our body. So, I was going to read another sutta, but I've read it to you before. And I don't think I will. I think I'd rather kind of hear your thoughts, especially since we're a small group. What's the wisdom of the Sangha? Do you have thoughts about this business?
So I wanted to raise some questions about part of the perspective and about American or Western Buddhism. Not about mindfulness, but about the meditation piece. So I am somebody who's been practicing Buddhism and consider myself a Buddhist at this point for 20 years, including meditation for most of that. But I fit into the way you helpfully described it as it's not happening for the most part.
Meaning, what's it that's not?
The meditation.
Okay.
So I've achieved some success in it. And notice the terminology. So if I were giving myself a grade, it would be a C if I were generous. And I would speculate that that's probably true for most of us here. Now, I'm not, for some people it does work very well, and it's also one of the other pieces, it's my understanding, though I'm far from certain of it, that Asian Buddhism typically has much less focus on the separate meditation, the sitting meditation piece. And it strikes me that it's very consistent with Western and particularly American culture. Americans, for example, have the highest work hours of basically anybody. So we're oriented towards work, achievement, achieving meditation success. It's something, it's clear, it's simple, it doesn't have this uncomfortable fuzziness. We can do it, we can feel we're working. If we work hard enough, we will succeed, as we are told in all the other places. And yet that thing of achieving the focus on the meditation object, it seems to me, is antithetical to the concept of mindfulness in meditation. So, at least paradoxical, perhaps antithetical. And so I wonder if we aren't taking something which, it's very hard to find the words to use, I mean, which doesn't work for many of us. And it also strikes me that it's somewhat similar to the Christian perspectives of, which I'm not Jewish in background, take the parts of the Bible we like, we believe in those. Other parts, such as gay people are bad most of the time. The other parts we don't believe. And from my understanding, Islamics do the same thing. And it seems to me that this is that it's not that the Buddhists didn't say that meditation was a path, and I certainly believe that, and I'm sure for some people here it is, but that was one of many things that he said were paths, as you pointed out, about visiting charnel houses and so forth. And so that's my discomfort with it. And the reason I'm uncomfortable is that I suspect that for me, and I suspect for many others, it keeps us on a path where we don't really progress as much as we might towards an understanding of the basic truths and practices of Buddhism.
Well, you covered a lot of territory.
I know.
I heard about 4 different
I understand.
topics there. The one that I'd like to come back to, though, is your original one, because what I heard is that it's not working for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be curious as to what that means.
It means what you described, monkey mind. Whereas I found
If you're
other
aware
parts
of monkey
Buddhism
mind,
work.
let me tell you this. This is why it's so useful to have teachers in our lives.
Okay.
Because if you're aware of monkey mind, you're having a very good meditation. There's a belief, especially among Westerners, that that meditation is calm tranquility. It's not. It can be. We can get to that point. But meditation can be sleepy mind, it can be monkey mind, it could be worry mind, it could be sadness mind. Mindfulness is about being completely present without judgment, non-judgmentally, about whatever is going on in our experience. And I'm guessing that the problem you're having is judgment related, that it's not okay to have monkey mind. Monkey mind happens to the best of us. And in my experience, in the practice of meditation is, yes, over time, with practice, monkey mind sometimes goes away a little bit, but it comes back. So it's the best question in the world, because it's the one that I hear most often, and comes from people that, especially people who are more beginners than you, that say, "Oh, I tried meditation once, I couldn't do it." And it's because the problem is they have an idea of what it is, of what meditation is, and that's that it's a calm, tranquil mind. So, don't despair. Yes.
I listened to everything that I've heard. You asked for a voice. For me, I can't speak for the Sangha. What I can say is I appreciate everything that you brought forward, and my perspectives are slightly different. My answer that I give myself when any of the judgmental thinking comes up, which I've learned is basically useless for me, because it's usually about things that have already happened or things that are yet to happen. So they're for me, they're fundamentally useless for me to give energy to. So the answer from he doesn't call himself a Buddhist, but Dr. John Connolly of Florida, out of his mouth came these words: "There's nothing that needs to be done about that by me right now." So that's the answer 99% of the time that I offer to myself in response 99% of the time, whether I'm in observing meditation mode or whether I'm with someone and some kind of separating emotion comes up, because the neutral state that we've spoken to, the loving neutral state, is usually something that happens effortlessly. It is the natural state of the human. The purpose of the organism is to continue. And it has mechanisms that are doing that all the time. So the purpose of the organism being to continue is always doing things to prevent its death. And that would include emotional messages that we call fear. But for me, even with the most recent of TV that I don't watch much, but a roommate got me to watch, that Neil deGrasse Tyson, as he showed me those bits and elements of everything that has ever been, traveled millions of miles away and survived and exploded and came back and then became what we are. It certainly reinforced and changed my perspective on this nebulous idea of reincarnation. That every little fleck of life that was on a rock that exploded here, and another thing came carotting into the earth, and it all burst forth and it went millions of miles away, and it happened to survive, and then eventually it just all floated back down to this particular spot. And that somehow I'm a piece of that. Certainly changes my perspective on the idea of somehow me not continuing. It's very satisfying to my mind to keep that in mind when fear of death starts to populate. So those are some of the things that I live with, and that is I would say the fast forward of where I'm at currently with what maybe you might join me with calling Buddhism.
So, may I interject after these two really interesting comments? What's it feel like to have your foot in a sock right now?
Can you repeat that once more?
How does your foot feel in a sock right now? That's your direct experience. And what our minds enjoy doing is going from that to that to that to what I'm talking about, which is trying to interpret and extrapolate and add to. But the point of this body stuff is getting back to a foot in a sock. Or the simplicity of your breath. Where do you feel your breath right now? Do you notice your breath at the tip of your nose? At the top of your lip? Simplify. And try not to be judgmental about it. Because that's where we get in our own way. It's when we start judging our experience. Like, oh, I'm not doing it right. There's no doing it wrong if you're mindful. If you're mindful of your wackiest neuroses, that's useful, that's skillful. But what I'm really encouraging you with this body stuff, with this particular sutta, this isn't the only way to meditate. This is kind of mindfulness 101. The Buddha said, okay, first foundation of mindfulness is be in your body. And notice what that's like. But where we want to go with our heads is listening to the guy sitting up here spouting theories and we did stories about the Buddha, which is a lot
Excuse
more.
me, were you just saying, were you making a statement about spouting theories?
Sorry?
Were you making a statement about spouting theories?
Values?
No, spouting theories.
Spouting theories. That's what I'm doing.
Thank you. I just wanted to hear that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, I mean, I'm giving a talk. I'm trying to verbalize something that is really hard to verbalize, this mindfulness of the body. Gets back to what my very first question is: what do you prefer, sitting meditation or dharma talk? Do you prefer the words and the theories and me spouting information, or do you prefer the direct experience of what's happening when you're sitting? No, I'm sorry, I wasn't referring to you. I apologize if it seemed that way.
I just wanted clarity. I appreciate your being here and prompting all of this. And I'm also stimulated with recognizing that some of the language no longer suits me. Period, in the whole realm of studying the sutras. I prefer the modern language of understanding how our bodies function and how brain and mind work.
Thank you.
That's what I prefer.
That's Waldo.
David, thank you for great talk. I was just thinking of an article that appeared in the New York Times yesterday, and it was entitled, it had to do with the sense of smell. It's like, you can't recognize that smell, you must be an American. And it was a very interesting article because apparently a group of sociologists, or what they were, studied a whole bunch of different groups from different cultures, and they were all given various stimuli, various tests, testing the five senses, with standard things. For vision, there were colors and shapes, and for smells, there were things like turpentine and various flower smells and bat dung, the whole range.
Bat dung.
And Americans, or educated Westerners, came at the bottom of the scale with smells. And made reference to various ways in which different cultures focus on different areas. Apparently Westerners are high on visual stimuli, but more so than sound, and that's some people attribute to reading, so that you get a lot of your thoughts through the written word. Anyway, no particular comment other than that it was really interesting. I was predisposed to listening carefully to what you were saying, because there's so many things that come at us all the time that we tune out.
Well, yeah, exactly. And it's really interesting to notice the senses we neglect, like smell. The sense that we tend to most overuse of our five senses, somebody's going to answer this right. Which one triggers your brain more than any of the other ones? Your mind.
Smell.
Vision.
Vision. Vision. Which is why we encourage you to close your eyes when you're meditating. Because if your eyes are open, if you're looking around, you start processing information. And liking and disliking and looking around and appreciating colors and noticing movement. And it's very difficult to have your eyes open and not be processing information. It just triggers the mind. So if we could shut down all of our senses, be in a sensory deprivation tank, that's an interesting experience. But in meditation, That's not so much the goal. We want to simplify our sensory experience, but we also want to just notice what's happening with our senses, noticing sounds, noticing bodily sensations. We can't turn off all of our senses. Because we're in a body, we have bodily sensations. So that smell is one that I totally agree with that we undervalue. I've never heard anybody suggest using smell as an object for meditation, but why not? Yes?
I just want to, this was the last comment, is that okay? My eyes are noticing the time.
Okay, one more quick one.
That's my meditation focus for the day.
Yeah, it's quick. My friends makes funny T-shirts, and he has the one that says, "I'm a process of puree." And I have intense monkey brain at all times, and to answer your first question, I do like Dharma talks best because it helps me later do what we're supposed to do. I'm always judging. I'm always pureeing, and so just in this meditation, the thing coming back to the breath, it's my mind was working on meeting minutes. My mind was doing all kinds of things, and then I would think. I liked what you said about the precognitive. It's like I thought, oh, you're not present. Then I started judging.
That's what happens.
Why are you not present? But then it was like, oh, shut up, go back to the breath. Because 25 Dharma talks ago, someone said when that happens, count your breath. And so I went back to the breath, and I got present for about 13 seconds.
That was just the perfect description of a really good meditation. Like, okay, my mind's crazy. I notice that. I'm judging it. I don't like that. Oops, I'm judging. Come back to the breath. 13 seconds. Like, okay, you're doing it right.
David, will you be in the lobby for further discussion?
I will.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Well, let's see. We have a host today. Yes?
We do.
Great.
My name is Jim. Welcome, everybody. There are retreats. Some are healthy, some are sweet. Out there, help yourselves. There's hot water for tea. If you have a cup of tea, please put your cup in the sink and I'll wash it later. I will be going around with a Dharma bowl, and we're inviting you to give $10 to support the sangha in the spirit of Dharma, generosity. Generally around 12:30, so people who want to get together to have lunch meet at the door and proceed to eat somewhere. And I can't think of anything else. Oh, well, just enjoy yourselves. It'd be nice to send the retreat. Huh? Oh, the retreat is in 2 weeks, and I believe there are a couple of slots left.
There are.
So talk to Jared.
Any other final announcements? Okay, I will announce that next week, Dale Borglum is the founder and executive director of the Living Dying Project. He is a pioneer in the conscious dying movement and has worked directly with thousands of people with life-threatening illnesses and their families for over 30 years. He will be here next week. Yes?
His talk will actually be on equanimity.
Great, thank you for that. Okay, let's circle around. By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity without too much attachment or too much aversion, believing in the equality of all that lives.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.